Hello, friends. Guess what? It's time for church, right now. I'm glad you're getting to worship God together as a family. I'm so excited we get to have church today. Every day when we get together for Crosstown, we start with our everyday song. Can you jump up on your feet and sing it? Let's go!
Every day I'll choose Jesus, I will follow you. 'Cause there's a world outside that can't seem to make up its mind. It's saying this and that, that and this, everything's changing all the time. You are the light, the truth, the way. So I'll say, hey, every day I'll choose Jesus, I will follow you. Let everything I do honor you every day. I'll trust and obey every word you say, 'cause I know that you love me. I'm following your way every single day. I wanna be who you want me to be. You are the light, the truth, the way. So I'll say, hey, every day I'll choose Jesus, I will follow you. Let everything I do honor you every day. Every day I'll choose Jesus, I will follow you. Let everything I do honor you every day. Every day I can
Trust you, Jesus,
every day I choose
to honor you,
every day I can
reflect you to others,
every day I am
who you say I am.
You are the light, the truth, the way. And I'll follow you every day. I'll say, hey, every day I'll choose Jesus, I will follow you. Let everything I do honor you every day. Every day I'll choose Jesus, I will follow you. Let everything I do honor you every day. Hey, every day I choose Jesus, I will follow you. Hey, every day I'll choose Jesus, I will follow you. Hey, every day I'll choose Jesus, I will follow you. Hey, every day I'll choose Jesus, I will follow you.
Hey everyone, my name is Brittany and we're so excited you are joining us today. Leading up to Easter, we're talking about a few stories that happened the week that Jesus was crucified and raised from the dead. And today we're talking about a story that takes place the night Jesus was arrested. Jesus was praying in a garden with his disciples, and while he was praying, he asked God a very interesting question. He asked God if there was any other way to save the world from sin. And then he said, if so, let it be that instead. But he said something very important, and it's what we're talking about today. He said, nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done. And sometimes it's hard to choose God's way, but God's way is ultimately always the best way. And that's why today we're saying every day I make choices that honor Jesus. But before we get to that, we're going to start things off by singing a song together. So go ahead, stand up, and sing this out with us as loud as you can.
Something to say and it will be heard. I am. I am who God says I am. Let's go. I am who God says I am. 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 I am forgiven. I am a winner. I have been chosen. Jesus, I am yours.
sounded so great. Thank you for singing with us. And now we're going to take some time to watch a Bible story together. And like we said before, we're going to be talking about the story of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. So let's take a look.
Jesus and his friends were quiet as they walked along the narrow path just outside of town. It was a cool, dark night, and they were headed to their favorite place to pray, the Garden of Gethsemane. Jesus came here often to talk to his Father, but he knew this time would be the last. "Will you stay awake and pray with me?" he asked his friends. But it was getting late, and even though they tried, their eyes got heavy and they drifted off to sleep under the olive trees. As they were sleeping, Jesus prayed. He had done this many times before, but on this night it felt different. He knew that it was almost time for him to fulfill his mission. He and his Father had planned it since the very beginning. Jesus was about to suffer for the sins of the whole world. The mission was going to cost him his life. "Father," Jesus cried as he knelt on the ground, "do we have to go through with this? Can we get your children back any other way?" But deep down, Jesus knew what he had to do. "Father, I trust you," he said. "I will do it." Just then, Jesus heard something off in the distance. He looked up and saw torches flickering in the darkness. There was an angry crowd of people heading right towards him. He woke up his friends, and as the crowd got closer, they could tell by the swords and spears twinkling in the moonlight that these men were soldiers. They had come to arrest Jesus, even though he had never done anything wrong. As the soldiers approached, they said, "We're looking for Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus wasn't scared of what was about to happen, so he said boldly, "I am." When he said this, the power of God knocked the entire mob of soldiers to the ground. Jesus could have easily just walked away, but he didn't. He let the soldiers arrest him and take him away. His friends didn't understand what was happening, and they were scared of what might happen to them, so they ran away. They left Jesus all by himself.
In our story today, Jesus was praying in the garden before he was arrested. And while he was praying, he asked his Father if there was any other way to save the world from sin, and if there was, let it be that. But then he said something so powerful. He said, "Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done." He made a choice to go God's way, even though it was the most difficult thing anyone would ever do. And we all make choices all the time. Our good friend Pastor Cameron is going to talk to us more about that now. So let's check it out.
Before we get started today, I want to ask you all a question. By show of hands, how many of you have made a choice today? Everyone's hands should be raised because even if you didn't raise your hand, you chose not to raise your hand. Ha-ha!
Somebody just gotcha.
We all make choices all the time. Like, what clothes should we wear? Or what do we eat for breakfast? Or do I brush my teeth this morning? Or are teeth even worth it? Whether we realize it or not, we are constantly making choices. Today we're saying every day I make choices that honor Jesus. So what does that mean? Let's talk about it. There are a few different types of choices that we all make every day, and each of these choices is like a different path. The first type of choice is like the path where there's really no right or wrong way. You know, the kind of choices that are like, should I eat Lucky Charms this morning or Cinnamon Toast Crunch? God's not going to be looking down on you from heaven, shaking his head saying, should have had the Cinnamon Toast Crunch. He's not going to do that because ultimately these choices have no right or wrong answer. Whether you eat Lucky Charms or Cinnamon Toast Crunch, both paths lead you to eating a delicious bowl of cereal. The second type of choice is the path where our way and God's way line up. These are the easy choices, the kind of choices that you know are right and you want to do them. You want to go God's way. In these choices, it's easy to follow God down the right path because it's the best looking option. It's kind of like how I have no desire to karate chop my grandma. I know God wouldn't want me to karate chop my grandma, and I love my grandma, so I would never want to karate chop her, so stop asking me. I know the choice is wrong, and I have no desire to go down that path. It's easy to choose God's way. The third type of choice is the path where we have to choose between our way and God's way. These choices aren't so easy. Sometimes the wrong choices may look fun and feel like the better option, but ultimately, when we choose our way over God's way, it's called sin. And sin is what separates us from God. God's way is the only path that leads to Him. And some of you may hear what I just said and think to yourselves, that means that you'll never have the things that you want anymore. And that when you go God's way, you never get to have any fun anymore. But that's not the case. A lot of the time, our way and God's way will line up, like I talked about in the second kind of choice. God does want you to have fun. He does want you to have nice things. But when things don't line up, there's God's way and there's our way. Which way are you going to go? We see Jesus make this third kind of choice in our Bible story today. Sometimes we will think that Jesus never had human desires and He always wanted exactly what God wanted. But that's not true. We saw Jesus have a very human moment in our story today. Remember, Jesus is all God, but He's also all human, which is confusing, but it's important to remember that He was also a human. When Jesus was praying in the garden, He asked God if there was any other way to save all of us. If so, let it be that instead. Jesus did not want to go through all of that pain, all of that suffering, and the cross. He knew it would be the most painful thing anyone would ever experience. But He said something very important as He was praying in Luke 22:42. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done. Jesus chose to go God's way, even though it was the hardest thing that anyone would ever have to do. He did it because He loves us so much, and He knew that it was God's will for Him to take the sins of the whole world on Himself so that we could be a part of God's family. If Jesus was willing to do that for us, shouldn't we be willing to make choices that honor Him? When we're faced with a choice between our way or God's way, are we willing to say what Jesus said? Not my will, but yours. Not what I want, but what you want. In John 14:15, Jesus said, "If you love me, you'll keep my commandments." Do you love Jesus enough to make choices that honor Him? Jesus loved us enough to go God's way and make a way for us to be a part of His family. Our response should always be to do exactly what Jesus did. Because of our love for Him, we should go God's way over our way. And when we do that, we're making choices that honor Jesus.
Pastor Cameron talked about how there are times in our lives when we have to choose God's way over our way, and that can be tough. But God's way is always the best way because it's the only way that leads closer to Him. So as this video ends today, I would encourage you to talk with your parents or small group leaders about this question. Is there somewhere in your life where you're going your way instead of God's way? If so, what is it? So that's it for this week, and remember that every day we should make choices that honor Jesus. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Hang on, friends. We've still got a Bible verse to learn. Everything we learn at church can be found in God's Word, the Bible. Today's verse is found in Titus 3:1. Be ready to do what is good. Jesus was ready to do what is good, wasn't He? Now, you say it after me. Ready? Titus 3:1. Be ready to do what is good. Way to go, friends! Now you can practice that at home and talk about these questions with your family. Bye-bye!